you still like to be Labour leader one day?
We get lines of questioning like this, no thanks. But Keir's got the most difficult job in British politics. And you know, Cathy, looking at the results today, he's doing a bloody good job.
Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer is to face a police investigation into whether he broke coronavirus rules in April last year while campaigning in Durham. Wes Streeting is Labour's Shadow Health Secretary, and he's on the line now. Good evening, Wes.
Good evening, Cathy.
Sir Keir Starmer might be hailing a big turning point, but the truth is you and he has underperformed.
The Labour Party had a near-death experience in 2019, and to, within the space of a couple of years of Keir Starmer's leadership, to be in a position where Labour looks to be in second place in Scotland, to be winning back in areas where we were punished by the voters, particularly, I mean, you heard Keir there talk about Cumbria and the new Cumberland Authority. You see the gains that Labour's made, control in Southampton, Worthing, where we're breaking new ground, and eating into what's been traditionally Tory territory. And then you look at a town like Hartlepool, where Labour made progress, which, if it had been a general election, and bearing in mind there was a by-election we lost only fairly recently, there'd be a Labour MP in Hartlepool. So, no, we're not downbeat about these results at all. I think they show good progress. When you take a result like Barnet, which I think has shown we've really turned the page on anti-Semitism, and all the work that Keir has done to deal with that toxic legacy has really been noticed by the voters. Well, I think it shows sound, solid progress. Of course, we've got more to do. We're not complacent, but we're not disappointed by any stretch. And these results are a disaster for Boris Johnson.
OK, you've got so much more to do, though, haven't you? Because if you look at the vote share, 35% roughly, if you extrapolate it, the same as it was in 2018 when Jeremy Corbyn was leader. So you couldn't get a majority in the general election if it was held tomorrow. You've got big work. You've got a mountain to climb, haven't you?
Well, what counts is the gap between Labour and the Conservatives. And I saw one analysis today that said that this was Labour's best performance against the Conservatives since 2012. So, but
what counts is whether you win a majority.
I'm not going to be daft about this. As I say, 2019 was Labour's worst result since 1935. It wasn't clear in the aftermath of that election whether the Labour Party would even continue to exist as a serious force in British politics.
OK, so a near-death experience then. You're just about alive now, are you?
No, I think we are now in a position where we've earned a hearing, we've dealt with the toxic legacy that Keir Starmer inherited, and we are making demonstrable progress in areas where Labour needs to win back the trust of voters we lost, but also win the support of a new and bigger coalition. And that's why, if you take the result of Worthing, where 5 years ago Labour didn't even have any councillors, now in control of the council, and you look at a place like Cumberland, a new authority granted, but which contains the key seats of Copeland, Workington, Carlisle, traditional Labour territory where voters gave us a real kicking in 2019. That's real progress. That's a sign of a formidable electoral coalition.
Well, we've
got more work to do, of course. Of course, we've got more work to do.
You keep mentioning a coalition. You and the Liberal Democrats, I asked the Lib Dems this earlier, you both want the Conservatives out. Why don't you do some kind of deal to make that happen?
We don't want to. We don't need to either, Cathy. I think that
you do. You're not going to get a majority as things stand.
When you look at the results in the round, I think it's become very clear that Britain has turned its back on the Conservatives and is waiting to see if the alternative excites them and if people are willing to put Labour into power. So the first half of Keir's period as leader of the opposition has been about detoxifying Labour and making us a serious force in politics again, getting a hearing from the public. I think without question, looking at the results today, he's done that. The next half of his time as leader of the opposition is about setting out the programme for government that inspires confidence. And I think we can do that. And of course, in terms of the Liberal Democrats and other parties, you're absolutely right to say that one of the things that's made Labour's jobs harder is in those Lib Dem Tory battlegrounds. The Liberal Democrats took an absolute trouncing in the past. The Liberal Democrats are doing much better now. I think overall that would be better for progressive politics. But Labour's in it to win it. We're in it to win a majority. And 2 years ago, I think people would not have expected to see the kind of progress we've seen today. Progress in Scotland, where Labour is now in second place and in bullish spirits. Progress in Cumbria, in Hartlepool, in places in the south like Southampton and Worth. And here in London, that's not. I mean,
you've done the name check. You've done. Yeah,
But I want to make this point about London as well, Kathy, as a London MP, because bizarrely, the Tories are trying to suggest that losing their flagship boroughs in Wandsworth and Westminster is somehow bad news for the Labour Party. I mean, give me a break.
yeah, well, you've got to start winning in the red wall. But anyway, you talked about progressive politics. We had a Lib Dem MP on earlier who gave a kind of tacit nudge towards advising people to vote tactically. Would you encourage people to do that, to look very carefully about whether it's best to vote Labour or Lib Dems if they want the Tories out?
My message is always vote Labour. I'm always going to make the case for Labour wherever people live. Voters are smart enough to make up their own minds. And I've addressed this issue of the so-called progressive alliance before. I don't think voters like backroom deals and stitch-ups.
But you're doing them anyway. You're just not admitting to it.
No, we're not, Kathy. We're genuinely not. I can tell you with absolute certainty and confidence, there aren't any deals with the Liberal Democrats. We're actually competing in different territory, to be honest.
Okay.
If you look at the Lib Dem Tory battlegrounds, the Labour Tory battlegrounds, it's different horses for different courses. There's no need for a deal, and that's not where we are, and that's not what voters want to see.
Right.
We'll let the Liberal Democrats worry about themselves. Our job is to inspire confidence in a Labour government in the next general election. On the basis of today's results, I think we're at the races, but we've got more work to do.
Well, you've had a serious setback today in terms of inspiring confidence as a Prime Minister in waiting, because the police are investigating Sir Keir Starmer over his drinks and curry with colleagues during lockdown. If the police find that he has broken COVID rules, should he step down as leader?
I don't see any reason whatsoever why this police investigation should be any different to the last.
That's not what I asked, though. If they find he's broken the rules, should he step down as leader?
But as I say, I'm not going to entertain the hypothetical, Kathy, because we've had more than a week now of a Tory spin campaign that's tried to put this issue on the front page in the hope that it would turn voters off. That's clearly failed.
But, police aren't taking into account any kind of political pressure or shenanigans. They have decided off their own bat to investigate this. You know how independent the police are. So I want to put to you, in January, Sir Keir tweeted this: "Honesty and decency matter. After months of denials, the Prime Minister is now under criminal investigations for breaking his own lockdown laws. He needs to do the decent thing and resign." Does the same apply to him?
Look, Keir Starmer practices what he preaches. That's why I have absolute confidence that Keir followed the rules at all times. The police found that before. I've got no reason to think that they won't find the same again. And
But
when it comes to honesty and trust and
preaches-
decency and integrity, that is the contrast between Keir Starmer and Boris Johnson. It is the difference between night and day.
Yeah, but if he practices what
I'm
he
not going to
preaches,
entertain
he's
the
got to
sort of
apply. Yeah, but he's got to apply the same rules to himself that he applied to the Prime Minister when he called for his resignation.
He does apply the same rules to himself. He will always follow the rules. This is who he is. This is what Keir Starmer stands for.
The implication is very clear from what you said. He'll resign if he's broken the rules and the police find that. He will resign.
I don't believe the police will find he's broken the rules.
If they do, he'll resign. It's quite clear.
I don't believe they will now. And I'm just not entertaining this silly story, this silly Tory smear campaign we've had on the front pages of the Daily Mail for over a week now. It didn't make a blind bit of difference at the ballot box.
Do you think the police are bound to pressure then? Political pressure?
I fully support the police in doing their job. The police are doing their job. We'll fully support them and cooperate with them in doing that. But I have every confidence that the police will find this time exactly what they found last time, which was there was no wrongdoing. And, I think ultimately Boris Johnson's got to still be held to account for the fact that he broke the rules regularly, repeatedly, and lied about it regularly and repeatedly. And the only reason there's been all of this mudslinging is that Boris Johnson, the Conservative Party, wants people to believe that we're all the same, that changing the Prime Minister, changing the government won't make a bit of difference. And I think that we're going to stand against that kind of cynicism in politics. That's not why I'm not entertaining this line of questioning.
But you're making people more cynical because you're not answering my question. Sir Keir called for the Prime Minister to resign when he was simply under investigation. He hadn't been found guilty of anything at that point. That is exactly the situation now for Sir Keir himself.
We knew exactly what had been going on in Downing Street because there'd been leaks left, right and centre and the police were acting as a result.
But there's video here. There's video here of him quaffing beer and eating curry with his colleagues. What's the difference between that and a slice of cake?
We know what Keir Starmer was doing in Durham. It was a year apart. It was during an election campaign. He stopped to have a meal with the Labour team in the middle of an election campaign, fully within the rules. That is very different in substance and in terms of the law from what we saw going on in number 10.
Rishi Sunak
and the
went
attempt
to a
conflate
meeting.
the two, I
Wait,
just
wait,
think
wait,
it's
wait a sec. I'm not complaining. I'm just saying.
it.
Wes, I'm just sending the facts out. Rishi Sunak turned up for a meeting. He didn't have a drink. He just happened to be there when there was a party. You know, that he was fined.
And that's the difference between Rishi Sunak and Keir Starmer. The police looked at Rishi Sunak's case and they issued a fine. The police looked at Keir Starmer's case and they didn't issue a fine. The police are looking at Keir Starmer's case again, and I don't expect they will find anything different to what they found last time.
Do you think they bowed to political pressure, the police?
I am absolutely not going to criticise the police for doing their job. They've got a difficult enough job without politicians providing running commentary on operational policing matters. And as a member of the shadow cabinet, I am not going to start criticising the police for doing their job. Of course, the police have been under a huge amount of political pressure in the press and from the Conservative Party. In terms of the Conservative Party, I think that's inappropriate, actually. But I'm certainly not going to criticise the police for doing their job. They've got a difficult job. Will cooperate fully. They did it before, they'll do it again, and I think we'll see the same outcome.
Would you still like to be Labour leader one day?
You get lines of questioning like this, no thanks. But Keir's got the most difficult job in British politics. And you know, Kathy, looking at the results today, he's doing a bloody good job, if I may say. And the progress we're seeing 2 years into his leadership after that near-death experience in 2019, looking at the progress we're making in those key battlegrounds that will form the next general election. This is more than I would have expected to see 2 years after that general election. And I think we can achieve so much more in the next 2 years. So there is everything to play for Labour at the next general election with Keir as our leader.
Wes Streeting, thanks very much. Pleasure to have you on the show.